All right. I will now call to order this meeting of the Village of Germantown Board of Zoning Appeals. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with Section 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that it will apprise the general public and news media of the subject matter that is intended for consideration and for action. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Jeffrey Nope. Christine Huber.
Here.
Tim Edwards.
Here.
Barry White.
Here. All right, did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting on June 8th? Does anyone have any changes or corrections? All right, then is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from the June 8th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved as written. Our first order of business is our first public hearing. The purpose of this hearing will be to hear any and all parties, their attorneys or agents, for or against a variance appeal filed by Joseph Schuster, property owner of W156 N10081 Pilgrim Road, Germantown, who is requesting a variance from section 17.48, paren 3, paren small c, restoration of certain non-conforming structures of the village's zoning code to allow the replacement of a previously existing 24 by 24 foot, that's 576 square foot, non-conforming accessory building, a detached garage, and replace it with a 24 by 36 foot, 864 square feet, accessory building, a detached garage. All right, Mr. Schuster, if you would come on up. So let me kind of tell you how this process works, and I try to do this for everybody. We try to make this as easy and informal and painless as we can. And so, because we know it can be, some people. In any event, that we have read, or we have received anyway, the submissions that you filed, and typically what we have found works, but it's entirely up to you because it's your case. What we have found works is if our zoning administrator sort of goes first and explains the zoning code and what the issue is, and then it allows you the opportunity to go and address those things that are on your form, because those are the factors that we, as the Board of Zoning Appeals, are limited to considering in order for us to grant this variance based on the village zoning code and also Wisconsin case law. We have to be able to find each of those things that you've addressed in your submission. So those will be the important points. Our power is limited to granting those variances only if we find each of them. So they're all equally important. With that all said, it's entirely up to you if you would like to start, or if you'd like one of the zoning administrators to walk us through the code first. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, you'll have plenty of time to make your presentation. It's just that if we start with what the code says, it usually gives us a lot more context to be able to understand your presentation and ask you questions. All right, great. Well, then you can have a seat for a second, and we will hear from either Mr. Retzloff. All right, Mr. Retzloff, Before you begin, if you'd raise your right hand, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Will you please state your name for the record?
Jeffrey Retzloff, zoning administrator for the Village of Germantown.
All right. Go ahead.
In June of this year, the Community Development Department reviewed a proposed detached accessory building permit for zoning compliance as part of an application that was received for a proposed 24 by 36 or 864 square foot garage. The new garage is intended to replace a 24 by 24 or 576 square foot detached garage that was damaged by a storm beyond repair and has since been raised. When reviewing the property and the replacement garage proposal, it was determined that there are two detached accessory buildings on the property totaling 976 square feet, including the 24 by 24 detached garage that was damaged by the storm, and a smaller 20 by 20 or 400 square foot garage in the back of the property, what would be the northwest corner of the property as shown on the screen. On the screen, the 24 by 24 garage is highlighted, circled in yellow. The photo was from before it was damaged and raised. And the smaller detached building is in the upper left. You can see that there. Section 17.41 of the zoning code regulates the number and the size of detached accessory buildings that are allowed on residential property in the village. The subject property is located in an RS4 single-family district, and as a result, there is an allowance for one detached building totaling not more than 1% of the total area of the property in the RS4 district. In this case, the maximum number of buildings obviously is one, and the maximum area allowed for the property at 1% is 864 square feet. Consequently, the property is non-conforming with respect to both the number and the total area of detached accessory building area allowed on the property, the 976 square feet versus the maximum 864 square feet. The property owner was advised at that time that he could not construct a replacement garage under the RS4 district provisions for accessory buildings because he had too many buildings and too much area on the property. However, the property owner was advised that he could replace the storm damaged garage, which is the intention of the replacement garage, under another provision in the code under section 17.48 that allows the replacement of non-conforming structures under certain circumstances. Section 17.48 sub 3 sub C states as follows. The restoration of certain non-conforming structures. Except as provided under subsection 2 below, damaged or destroyed non-conforming structures may be reconstructed and or restored if the structure will be restored to the same size, location, and use that it had immediately before the damage or destruction occurred if all of the following apply. The non-conforming structure was damaged or destroyed on or after March 2nd, 2006. Yes. The damage or destruction was caused by violent wind, vandalism, fire, flood, ice, snow, mold, or infestation. Yes. The second provision reads, the size of a non-conforming structure that is reconstructed or restored pursuant to section 1 above may be larger than the size it was immediately before the damage or destruction, if necessary for the structure to comply with applicable state or federal requirements. And the answer in that situation is no. There are no state or federal requirements that require the replacement garage to be larger in this particular case. The property owner was advised that a new replacement garage could be constructed under this provision. However, it would have to be constructed at the same size, the 24 by 24, and in the same location and used for the same purpose. The only difference with the replacement garage is the size. Mr. Schuster is proposing 24 by 36, and according to this provision, the maximum allowed detached replacement garage can be 24 by 24. As a result, Schuster is asking for a variance from this section of the code to allow construction of a larger replacement garage, 24 by 36 versus the 24 by 24 that is being replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Retzloff right now? All right. All right, Mr. Schuster, now you're up. And so if you would be kind enough. Yep.
Oh, okay.
So before we get started, if you would raise your right hand, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right. Will you state your name and address for our record, please?
My full name is Joseph Paul Schuster, West 156 North 10081 Pilgrim Road.
Excellent. All right. You can begin.
We obviously know already that this was a storm damage. Some things that are happening on here, we call this garage as a non-conforming garage, which I can't understand that it's non-conforming. It's been there since 1958. So if we have a confirmation problem, it would really be the other building in the corner of my yard. Now in 2003, I had built that building in the corner of the yard. It was classified as a shed per the Village of Germantown. At this point, this is in 2003. At this point, I had to ask, would I ever be able to expand my garage? And they said, yes, you could make it to 860 square feet and you will be maximumed out. So I'm guessing somewhere between 2003 and now, we've changed the coding and the zoning or something happened here. So with that being said, really, the garage, I don't call it non-conforming because it's been there forever. It would really be because I have that other accessory building. We call these accessory buildings, back in '03, a garage was a garage, a shed was called a shed. From what I understand, and paperwork that I'd be given, and I don't understand it, is if I could connect the garage to the house, I can build it as big as I want. Well, I don't know how many people probably all have driven by this house. My house was built in 1840, not 1940, 1840. It is 70% pioneer log. This house has no provisions to make it an attached garage. Second of all, I would never want to wreck the historical nature of that house because underneath all that fancy siding and everything is a beautiful log house with no damage to any kind of logs. So I would not want to ever wreck that in case somebody down the line would like to further that into a historical house. So what I'm asking for is on the same footprint of the 24 by 24, I'd like to add another 12 feet in length, which that would be going towards the south. And if you see at that little, by the bottom of the circle, that kind of little area, that's my garden. So basically the garage would come out to the start of the garden. It would be just a little bit short of that. A 24 by 24 garage is really not 24 by 24 as measured on the outside. I have a truck that is a everyday truck. You see them by the thousands, Dodge Rams, whatever. That truck measures 22 feet 3 inches from the front license plate to the rear trailer hitch. The truck will never fit in there. At this point in my life, I would surely love to park in the garage for once. Second of all, I do have to worry about changing times and crime. The property that is right next to me, the car was stolen right out of the driveway at 4:30 in the morning on February 1st. So this also brings another safety concern. I'd like to try to start keeping my vehicle out of the weather. I'd also like to have it more secure than just locking the doors. I'd like it to be in a building. The extra 12 feet of depth, which brings it up to 864 square feet. Like I said, we're making it longer so we can get the truck in there. At the same time, telling you my house is built in 1840. You really don't have a usable basement. My basement is about this tall. So even my wife at 5'4" has almost got a duct. With that being said, I am a wood pellet heating house. I heat my complete house on wood pellets. That requires 4 skids of pellets at 8,000 pounds. So that also we could keep the pellets in the garage. I personally myself classified it as a garage. My other building, I call a shed. That's what it originally was intended to in 2003. Other than that, like I'm, I'm trying to keep it all the same, so it matches the house and matches the other building, which my other building still has shingle roof on it yet, which is gonna be time to put a metal roof on it, so then it will match. My siding colors are all the same. I don't wanna make anything look odd. Personally, if you drive down Pilgrim Road and you see that garage, you're never gonna notice 12 feet. It still puts me 38 feet, 0.3 inches off my lot line to the south. So you have more than enough, area there yet, and it does not create any kind of safety concerns. I have went to my neighbors, I believe you probably all have the paperwork, and talked to my neighbors and asked them if they had a problem. Is this disrupting the neighborhood? Is it gonna make it look out of place? And all that, and I've had them sign everything that they're in agreement, and it's neighbors that can all view my property. The church is right next to me. They don't really use that backside of church, so they can't view it, but it's an adjacent property. So I would like to build it. I only want to do this once. I don't want to do it again. I would like to build it at the 24 wide by 36 deep. And really, honestly, that's about all I can tell you. This is what I'm going for. These are reasons I'm going for it. If we had changed the code somewhere between 2003 and today, I apparently say that we've gone backwards with this code then. Because that would like be building a house with 1 bathroom. When's the last time you've seen a house built with 1 bathroom nowadays? We're supposed to be progressing. Now, if I was trying to build a 4 or 6 car garage, I think it would be out of place. It wouldn't even look right on the property in my eyes. Also, attaching the garage, if you did, to the house would probably cost me an additional $10,000 to $12,000. Lumber and everything is not cheap, along with anything else. And it will cut me off from my backyard. It'll shut down my backyard where you're going through a breezeway or whatever, or you're walking all the way around the garage. So this is what I'm going for. Simple, plain, built to code, built to conforming paint match or material match, everything. And just trying to keep it all one look with the extra 12 feet. So I can park my truck in the garage. Other than that, it is a little bit stressful because, this happened back in August with the big storms. And that big willow tree fell on it, the whole 9 yards. I couldn't even get a concrete guy until March of this year. It's hard to get people to work. They're short-handed. And so it brings a lot of things. As I stand right now, if you approve this all, I can go and order my garage. I won't see a garage door till at least April or May. So, yeah, it's a little stressful. I don't have a garage. I like my wife to park in the garage for winter. Didn't get it last year. I'm just trying to get through it. So that is all I have to say, really, I guess. I mean, these are my reasons why I'd like to increase the garage. I understand that things and codes change. I kind of feel that we're going backwards on this. I would understand it if I was trying to build a 4 or 5 car garage. But then at the same point, I don't understand that if I'm just running a couple 2x4s and some wall sheeting and a concrete pad or a slab for a connecting breezeway or whatever you want to call it to the garage, I can build the garage as big as I want then. Which that kind of doesn't make sense just because it's connected to the house. The garage right now, as it sits, is at the conforming measurements of how far it needs to be away from the garage. I personally rather have a detached garage. just 2 vehicles in there is a fire hazard. Anything can happen. So that keeps it away from my house. So that is my points. That's where I'm at. Any questions or anything?
What do you use the shed for?
The shed will have lawnmowers. I have like table saw in there, stuff like that, because I don't have a basement that is usable for this stuff.
Expand your garage to the size that you want, the 24 by 34. Would you have enough room for your lawnmowers and your table saw? Because what I'm thinking is that you can build the size of your garage if you get rid of I believe, I'll ask Mr. Retzloff this, but I believe if you get rid of the shed, you can build your garage the size you want.
That would be a dirty shame. I'll be honest with you. That shed is like brand new, and I utilize it like
I thought you said 2003.
2003. So it's like brand new. I mean, oh, it's like brand new.
Oh, I see what you're.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not like it's a 70-year-old. Yeah, it's not like it's a 70-year-old building. I would hate to demolish that. And to add on, the gal said to me, she goes, well, maybe you could add on to that. Well, why would I want my garage way over there to walk in that? Second of all, if I go to the east, which is towards the road, my lot line comes on an angle. So I wouldn't be able to make it. And width doesn't help me. Depth helps me. Depth is what is important to me. So I can get my vehicle in there. And like I said, the shed, you're exactly right. What's in there? Well, my lawnmowers, table saw, workbench. This is where I basically have to do everything, because I don't have that functional basement that, most people have. So it's an extra perk. I do have a motorcycle, and that's where I park it over there. It just makes it easier to get into a garage without having a motorcycle sitting there. Yeah, I honestly, I don't want to tear that down. That shed is built way beyond inspector's belief. The inspector laughed at me when I built that. He says, you overdid it. Well, I want my buildings to stand forever. So that is the proposal I'm going for, accordance to my neighborhood, my neighborhood that can see it. Nobody really has a problem with it all or anything. I look at it as all it's going to do is make my property look better. Current garage that was there that got demolished, yeah, that roof looks nice and new because I did it with the house. The siding was from like 1972, faded aluminum. The garage was starting to lean a little bit already. So not that it was an eyesore, but it didn't look nice, clean, and neat. This will look nice, clean, and neat. It'll match the house. It'll look good. And it'll be solid. And that's all I'll need for the rest of my life. But again, like I said, I'm thinking that the codes kind of went backwards on this a little bit. At the time I built that in 2003, I was allowed to add on to the garage. A garage was called a garage. It wasn't anything detached wasn't classified as an accessory building at that time. That was a shed. This was a garage. And that's how they called it. So I don't know why I could build so big just because I attach it to the house. That is a little bit of an issue there. I can build it as big as I want if I attach it, and I understand that because it's detached now, it's called an accessory building. It's still, everybody's got a right to park into a decent garage, and I don't have a vehicle that's out of the ordinary. It's a standard issue Dodge Ram truck that runs around by the thousands, and my wife has a small car, so we're good, so.
I will mention, for whatever it's worth, the issues that you have with the zoning code really are things that you can take up with the village board and try to seek amendments to the zoning code, or make your point that there's, things that you think are moving backwards. But for our purposes,
Right.
we're stuck with the code that we have, regardless of whether we agree with you or disagree
Right. Yeah,
with
you
about
can't modify the code system.
logic of
Right.
it. All right.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Schuster? Nothing? Mr. Retzloff, can I ask you a couple of things? And I'm going to have one more for you.
Sure.
This notion of attaching to the garage, or attaching to the house, what is the definition of attached? I mean, if you really put sort of a trellis, just a little bit of a walkway, does that attach it? You nail a couple of nice looking 2x6s or something?
You probably answered your own question. No,
No.
that doesn't cut it. The definition is that the two structures share a common wall for a distance of at least 15 feet. So you could have two buildings that are offset, not that they would be like corner to corner. They have to share a common wall. Or you can put in a breezeway, but it has to be on a foundation that matches the house. It has to have enclosed walls and a roof structure, and it can't be any longer than twice the width. So you couldn't have, a detached building that's literally, hundreds of feet away and then try and attach it with some really long, narrow kind of breezeway. That doesn't cut it either. So there was a lot of thought put into that many years ago when the concept was to allow for, it was one of the provisions that we put in the code to try and bring it up to date, so to speak, to accommodate the attachment. And at the same time, there was basically a policy decision on the part of the village that having an attached garage versus detached would increase the property value and be more aesthetically pleasing and give the opportunity for the owner to have another or a separate detached garage without there being a cluttering, if you will, of multiple detached buildings. So there's been a lot of changes to this particular part of the code since 2003. The interpretation has changed. I would say this, even though the terminology is slightly different than what was used back then, shed, detached accessory building. The code was written, they were all two, should have been interpreted to be the same. And I would suggest that my predecessors, whoever granted you that ability in 2003, were being very kind in their interpretation and allowing you to have that additional building.
And that's their
And it may very
interpretation.
well have been, frankly, in acknowledgement of your probably argument back then. You don't have a basement. So I understand the dilemma and the desire to not deface, if you will, a log structure. Unfortunately, it seems to come down to sort of either personal choice or just the cost or what have you that would prohibit that from happening.
Under 17.48, where it says he can restore the structure to the same size, location, and use that it had, does location mean the exact footprint? And what I'm getting at is, I don't know if this is possible, but whether or not he could build the same 576 square feet, but have it be a little bit longer, maybe 28 by something, so that he can get his truck in there, and not go as far as 34? Or does location mean that it has to be the same footprint in your view?
In looking at that, I've thought that myself, and I think, frankly, if the intention was it had to be in the exact same footprint, that the writers of the statute might have put in that phrase or implied or described it in that manner. I think, frankly, for our purposes, interpreting location somewhat liberally, as long as it's relatively behind the house and not, skewed way to the front corner along Pilgrim Road, I think, we can work on that, whether the shape is the same, the footprint. I don't think that's a tremendous issue here.
Okay.
So yeah, I would agree. In fact, I was thinking that as we were listening to the conversation, that, it's possible to adjust the dimensions to accommodate the vehicle size.
And of course, excuse me, of course, you don't really want to move the location. Why would you want to put it in the front yard? It's your garage. You want to have a decent access to it. I mean, we've seen houses already where people's garages are maybe 25, 30, 40 feet away. And it's like, oh man, that's kind of a bummer when it's pouring out or it's a blizzard out. As far as the attachment part goes, I had read that code, and it is very precise code. I have friends that go, oh, I just put a couple 2x4s up with some sheeting. It don't work like that. Because what's gonna happen is something's gonna happen. And you're gonna make that thing like a spaghetti noodle, and then your breezeway is gonna blow down, but your garage is still standing yet. It doesn't make sense to do half the work in a connection area. It has to be done structurally correct, which will, it's just not feasible for my house. I wouldn't do that.
When you got your design for this 24 by 34, whoever, or I don't know if you're building that or if you.
I'm building it myself, so I use a design thing through Menards and everything. Did I include that with?
I don't think you do.
I don't think I did, and I didn't bring that packet along, but I do have the design print, which basically the pitch of the roof and everything would be the same as what the old structure was.
Would it be possible to design it instead of 24 by 34? Could you do maybe something like 21 by 28, which gives you the same square footage, which Mr. Retzloff just said he would allow?
But now we're getting pretty narrow, because the truck is 9 foot mirror to mirror.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have the newest versions of truck where you can just push a button and the mirrors come flying in and everything. So that all going, making it a little bit narrower and longer, I get the depth out of it. Now I have an issue with the width of when the wife's car is in there, can I really get in there? Because that's going to make it pretty narrow. This would, I've done a handful of designs, and this is really the one that would work the best for the situation. Keeping the same width footprint, just going to the south 12 feet.
Anybody else have questions for Mr. Schuster? Any questions for Mr. Retzloff?
I do have a question for Mr. Retzloff. So in the RS4 district where this is there a limit on the size of attached garages?
No, there really isn't a limit on a specified limit. There's some total impervious area maximums for the whole property that might kick in if the garage got really large.
Okay.
And that would probably be the only limiting factor. The intention of not having a prescribed maximum on attached was in fact to help encourage the attachment,
Right. Okay. I just didn't know if it was true that you could literally have a 10-car garage attached if you wanted to.
It could get there, yeah.
If parcel is large enough, you
Okay.
probably could, yeah.
Yeah, if you make the percentage part or whatever of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Schuster, well, I'll come back to you in a second. Is there anybody here wishing to speak in favor of the requested variance? Come on up. Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Will you state your name and address for our record, please?
My name is Bruce Hawley Sr. My address is West 156 North 10092 Pilgrim Road. I'm directly across the street from Joseph.
All right, what would you like to tell us?
Well, I get all the zoning and the measurements and the requirements or not. But if we look at it from my point of view, I look across the street at his house every night. Many times I look out my front window, I see Joseph's house. It's a well manicured property, always clean, grass is always trimmed. There's no issues. He's very respectful to all the neighbors. And I look out there, I see that garage. I'll be honest with you, that garage, no matter how long or how short it is not going to affect my sunset view any more than his house would be, all right? I don't think anybody will even notice it. I don't know it there because of the issue going on now with it, and I've seen him take it down when the tree fell on it, but I don't think, if you want to take that into consideration, I don't think it's going to be a big impact. He's got twice the lot I've got, he's look like a farm, he's so big there. We were a farm at one time. But, you know, I don't, looking at it that way, I don't see there should be an issue. I don't believe any neighborhood would say so either, no. That's basically my view on it, just that I don't think it's gonna clutter up the neighborhood. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else that wants to speak in favor of the requested variance? I do have, and I will note for our record that Mr. Schuster submitted several letters signed by various neighbors saying that they feel the addition would not affect the neighborhood. And I'll list those people who signed this, those letters. We have one from Doris Osterhaus at Crossway Church. We have one from Joseph Sonneman, one from Steve and Karen Toms, one from, oh, Bruce and Doreen Hawley. Mr. Hawley just spoke. One from Billy Bruggish, maybe? One from Brian, don't know. The address is W156 and 10004 Pilgrim Road. One from Dale and Laurel Poppy. And one from Stephen Hansen. And finally, we got an email from Bruce Hawley as well. Again, speaking in support of the variance. All right. Mr. Retzloff, I got one more question about the 864 square foot limit. So under the zoning code as it exists now, he can cover 1% of the total area or 864 square feet, whichever is greater, right?
Correct.
What is the thought behind limiting an accessory building to 864 square feet regardless of the size of the lot? Why is it capped at 864?
The previous code, before we started making changes in 2005, I believe, had that same 864 square foot number in there that would sort of a carryover, the same provision that if you had a residential property and you did not have an attached garage, you could have a detached garage up to 864 square feet. The thought was just to keep that same number intact and then build from there so that essentially as the property grew larger, there'd be a greater allowance for accessory building area. And the 1%, you know, on an acre, 1% is, what is it, 42,560. So it's about 430 square feet. So allowing the 864 was sort of seen as a bonus that up to a certain size parcel, you're allowed up to 864, whichever is larger or the 1%. And sort of keeping that number intact just sort of made some sense at the time. But the larger you got, eventually you're allowed more accessory building area. And then once you get into the residential districts that allow larger lots or require larger lots, I believe it's the RS2 district where then you're allowed 2 detached buildings up to a total area of the 1%, or I think it's 1.5% in that particular district. The thought is to try and move away from what was sort of the reverse situation back in 2003. Regardless of the size of your lot, in any of the residential districts, the maximum area was 864 square feet. That is what really didn't make sense to us at the time, and the reason why we made the change to build in an allowance for a greater greater number and greater area for accessory building space as your parcel got larger in size. That seemed to be sort of intuitive and made more sense than just having this cap of 864 that applied to half acres, 1 acres, or 5 acres. And I guess it's unfortunate in this particular case that the 1% or the 864, the parcel size is just it's small. It's 0.9 acres.
I see. Okay, thank you. That helps. All right, anybody have any final questions? No? All right, Mr. Schuster, I didn't ask. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the requested variance? Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter, but neither speaking in favor of or opposed to the requested variance? All right. Mr. Schuster, the way this works is that I'm about to close our hearing, and then we'll begin our deliberation. So this is sort of, as they would say in an auction, this is last chance. Yeah, that's it. If there's anything else you would like to tell us, this is the time.
I don't know if my case is perfectly clear or not. I think my biggest misunderstanding is why can we build a garage so big just because it's it's mounted with a breezeway or connected to a back of a house? I get it. Versus a detached garage. And at this point, I'm not looking bigger is better. I just want enough room so I can get my truck in there and be happy. Would I love to have a 6-car garage? No, because that means you buy more stuff and you got more mess. I'm just happy with just getting depth so I can get my truck in there. The part of the attached and the detached thing, that is the real curious one. Because whether it's there or not, if it's attached or not, I don't know if that should really be in consideration. You're making it a garage. What calls it a garage? Just because it's screwed to it could be the wall of your house like a normal newer house is, or connected with a breezeway. Well, just because it's connected, now you can call it a garage, not an accessory building. That part, I'm just a little dazzled by. But other than that, I mean, you understand where I'm going here. I'm just looking for that extra 12 feet for the principal reasons that I've told you, and not looking to sit there and I'm not trying to bust up codes and all this stuff, but I'm trying to get something that works for me in this time of the world. So that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Before I close the hearing, anything final from anybody else? Nope. All right. Well, then I'll declare this hearing closed, and we can begin our deliberations. As we always do, we must consider the same 5 factors that we always have to consider. The first of which is whether or not the variance will be contrary to the public interest or will or will not be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code. What does everybody think?
I think for the first part, not contrary to the public interest. I think we got relatively large number of testimony saying that it's not backing them. Struggling with the accordance in the spirit of the zoning code, though.
What's anybody else think?
Well, I was thinking that it would be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code, because I see the spirit of the zoning code as being to ensure that we don't have properties that are cluttered with buildings or have garages that, are dominating the appearance of the property, which just creates an unsightly look. And I don't think that would be the case here at all.
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, that's certainly the spirit of the prohibition on size and number of detached buildings. But I don't know that it is consistent with the spirit of the section that Mr. Retzloff cited that says where you've got a non-conforming use, so he wouldn't be able to do it now. And you've got this non-conforming use, and the zoning code then says if that non-conforming use gets destroyed, you can still have it back. We're not gonna say that you can't rebuild it, but you can only rebuild what you had before. So I
Yeah,
see
so
what
it's
you're
a
saying. I'm really
different-
struggling
a
with it. 'Cause
different code that is
Right.
aligned with
Yeah,
the
right,
spirit
right.
of, but
Yep.
this particular part about the replacements
Yeah, yeah.
was just,
No,
the spirit of that code was
I don't,
just
I don't
get
feel-
back what you had, but, no more.
I don't feel all that strongly about it. What do you think?
I would agree that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Obviously, the neighbors have spoken loudly that it's not an issue to them. However, I think the spirit of the code in its broadest sense is to promote conformity or to promote uniformity between properties. And Mr. Schuster has some unique situations with a larger truck and an older home and that type of thing. In some ways, the ordinance could be looked at as being somewhat generous in that it's a non-conforming property in this area, and the village is allowing Mr. Schuster to put it back the way it was, which was non-conforming to begin with. But again, it comes back to that uniformity. If we allowed a variance for 12 extra feet of a garage, would we allow 15? Or would we allow some other type of variance in a similar situation, but more, a greater ask, if you will, than Mr. Schuster is making at this time? So I would argue that the variance will not be in accordance with the spirit of the zoning code.
Okay.
I agree with that statement, just in that, because the zoning code we're discussing is the replacement. And the replacement, I think the spirit is, you lost it because of some sort of, issue, whether it was storm or whatever. Put back what you had in the same manner. So I agree. I think it's not in accordance with that section of the zoning code.
All right, let's move on to number 2, whether there are or are not exceptional, extraordinary, or unusual conditions or circumstances that apply specifically to this lot parcel use, structure, or intended use that do not apply generally to other properties or uses in the same district.
Well, I think there are extraordinary conditions, that being the historic nature of the house and the fact that you would not want to attempt to put an attached garage on that building to preserve the historic properties of it.
Anybody else?
I think that, to me, that serves as like an unusual condition.
I'm torn by this one because there are some unique features of the home built in the I think it was the 1840s. But I don't know if it's I would gauge that it's probably an extraordinary occurrence for someone to add an attached garage to an existing home. That's not something that, at least in my experience, is something that is done quite often. I wouldn't expect that would normally be a solution in a situation such as this.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one too. I mean, I see the point about why you wouldn't attach a garage. I think that makes perfect sense. And Mr. Schuster's right that there seems to be some disconnect between this idea that a detached garage that's just a few feet away from the house can only be a certain size, and if it was attached, it could be, you know, as big as he wanted it to be. So there is that disconnect, but there's nothing we can do about that. That's the village board. We get what, you know, we have to deal with what we have. So I mean, what I'm struggling with here is what is extraordinary about the parcel itself when he, you know, right prior to the time the tree fell on it, he was using the 24 by 24 foot one, and he got, you know, use out of his property that other people got. He just couldn't park his truck in the garage. And I understand his desire to park the truck in the garage. I have no, you know, that if we, you know, and I understand the request. It's a question of whether we have, you know, the authority to grant it. So but I, you know, again, yeah, I'm struggling with it because I understand the request and I understand the need for the request but I'm having a hard time getting there.
Well, I guess I was reading it as whether there are exceptional conditions that apply specifically to this lot or parcel use, structure or intended use. And I was thinking of the structure as being the home, but
Oh, I see.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well,
it's part of the overall structures of what is on the property.
That's the way that I interpret it too. And what comes to mind is the limited use of a basement in a home this old.
I
Right.
was thinking that too.
But it seems as though, as Mr. Retzloff commented, that there might have been a generous offer to Mr. Schuster in the past, allowing him to have two outbuildings to perhaps compensate for that loss of a basement use. But now we have another request for granting another larger outbuilding to again address the loss of a basement, if you will. I would tend to lean towards that there are not exceptional, extraordinary, or unusual conditions.
All right, let's look to number 3. Whether the variance is or is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same. Does anybody think about that one?
Well, I think that would hinge on, you know, whether we would call the ability to park a, you know, 22-foot long vehicle indoors. Is that a substantial property right possessed by other properties in the same district? I don't know.
He's managed this long without it.
And, you know, is it just, you know, I don't know,
Yeah, no, that's good.
people can't park Dodge Rams in their attached garages? I probably couldn't. I don't know. But I mean, I do think having, you know, some type of indoor garage, a place to park a vehicle, I would consider property right, a substantial property right possessed by other properties in the same district.
You can have a 24 by 24. I don't know that a
True.
24
I mean,
by
that's true.
24 is a substantial property right that, and, you know. And he could have it if he got rid of the shed. And I know he doesn't want to get rid of the
Well,
shed.
that's true.
I understand. I'm looking for a way that we can make this work, but I'm struggling.
Yeah, so I guess with getting rid of the other shed, he could have right? He could have
Yeah, it would, it'd be right at the limit, but he could do it.
mhm.
I think that right, arguably, he probably had that before the tree took out his shed, you know, for years before.
Right.
So we're talking like preserving the right that had before, so unless there was like trying to seek that for the tree, feels like maybe he had that right prior to.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Number 4 is whether the variance will or will not create a substantial detriment to the adjacent property, will or will not be contrary to public safety or interest. That one, I think I think we know for sure, right?
Yep.
That it would not create a substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not be contrary to public interest.
I would agree.
A literal enforcement of the terms of the zoning code would or would not result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship to the applicant. Anybody think?
Again, I would just argue that the village code currently allows Mr. Schuster to be made whole, to put his property back the way it was before the storm. So I don't know how that would create any type of unnecessary hardship.
Yeah, it's the same. It's,
Right, I don't think it introduces a hardship if,
right, it puts him back where he was. And then there are some other, options, the shed, and I understand that. Maybe changing the configuration of the garage to get the extra couple of feet. I know it would be narrow, but maybe you can make that, maybe you can somehow make that work. Maybe there's something to do with the village board. But to talk about, the apparent inconsistency of the detached and attached garages being allowed to be different sizes. But I'm agree too that putting him back in the same position he was in before is not an undue hardship because he lived with it before. All right. Since there are anybody else have any other thoughts? Since there are an even number of us, and it could be a tie, we need to, I don't think it's going to be, but we need to phrase the motion in the positive. So the motion ought to be to grant the variance. Sometimes the motion will be to deny, but because 2-2 would not grant the variance, we need to phrase it in terms of a positive motion. So I'll make the motion that we grant the variance.
I'll second it.
The motion to grant the variance having been made and seconded, our clerk will call the roll.
Jeffrey Nope,
Nay.
Christine Huber,
Aye.
Tim Edwards,
nay.
and Barry White.
Nay. Mr. Schuster, I'm afraid that we did not feel we had the power to grant your variance under the zoning code. This is the worst part of serving on this board because I understand why you need it and why it would be valuable to you. With that said, you will get notice in the mail of our decision today, and it will explain to you your options for appealing our decision to the circuit court. Thank you for your presentation. It was a good presentation, but I feel like our hands are tied. All right, our next order of business is to hear any and all parties, their attorneys or agents for or against a variance appeal filed by Zane Nichols, agent for St. John's Church, property owner of N104W14181 Donges Bay Road, Germantown, who is requesting a variance from section 17.46, paren 7, paren small h, paren 2, to reduce the minimum setback of an electronic message board from a residential district from 150 feet to 120 feet. Mr. Nichols? So, all right, so before you heard how this goes?
All good.
So if you want the zoning administrator to go first, that it works pretty well for us. All right, so Ms. Zant, if you would raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Will you state your name for our record, please?
My name is Emily Zant. I'm the Associate Planner and Zoning Administrator.
All right. You can go ahead.
Okay. The subject property is located on the south side of Donjas Bay Road, just west of Fond du Lac Avenue. This is an image looking southwest of the property. There was a sign application submitted by the applicant in July of 2022 to construct a new monument sign with an electronic message board component for St. John Church located on Donjas Bay Road. Following communication between the applicant and planning and zoning staff, it was determined that the proposed monument sign did not comply with the applicable sign provisions in the code. Specifically, section 17.46, subparent 7H2 of the code, which prohibits electronic message boards from being located within 150 feet of a residential zoning district boundary. The proposed monument sign is located, would be located 120 feet from the nearest residential district, which is located on the north side of Donjas Bay Road. So the applicable zoning code is on the screen, and at the bottom is the provision that they're seeking a variance for. So it's electronic message board shall not be located within 150 feet of a, excuse me, of a residential zoning district boundary, or located, designed, or operated in such a manner as to create, in the opinion of the Plan Commission at the time of the sign approval, a negative visual impact on property used for existing residential purpose or uses. And so it's the proposed monument sign. It does meet the other criteria for electronic message boards and monument signs. So the proposed location of the sign is just east of the parking area setback, about 10 feet south of the sidewalk there. This is the zoning map for the area. The institutional use is the church. As you can see, there's residential districts on all four sides of the property. They do meet the setback from the east district, the west, and that's just the district across the street, which is that RS4 residential district that is not met. So here's a proposed location of the sign. Actually, the setback, it's set back 120 feet, and you can see it's at sort of an angle there, but it would be about 120 feet from the residential district. So again, they're seeking a variance to reduce the minimum setback from a residential zoning district from 150 feet to 120 feet.
I assume that the rationale for this 150-foot setback is that you don't want light from the electronic sign bothering people in their house or in their yard, right?
Yes.
Do we, and I understand it goes to the boundary, but just humor me. How close do the houses sit back from the lot line across the street, across on Donjas Bay? I understand we're 120 feet from the lot line, but do we know how far we are from anybody's actual house?
I mean, it's not on the screen here, but I would say at least 40 or 50 additional feet.
And where can you point on there where the sign is intended to go? All right.
I would mention we did have, or you did address a similar variance request in August of last year for a church on Pilgrim Road. So that, as just for some context here.
Yeah, I recall. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Van Zant? Sorry. All right. Mr. Nichols, you're up. If you would raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Will you state your name and address for our record, please?
My name is Zane Nichols, and my address is 1918 East Lafayette Place.
And as we say, well, you saw how these things work. And so you know the things that we have to consider. Those are the things that you filled out on the form. So those are the things that it helps us if you focus on those things, but it's your presentation, so I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. So good evening, members of the board. First, I just want to say thank you all for listening to our appeal on behalf of St. John's. As I said, my name is Zane Nichols. I'm the PMA with Lemberg Electric. We've applied for this variance on behalf of St. John's United Church of Christ. We are requesting a variance appeal from section 1746, subsection 7H2, to reduce the minimum setback of an electronic message board from a residential district from 150 feet to 120 feet. St. John's United Church of Christ is a staple in the Germantown community and has been since its inception in 1843. We are requesting that the proposed EMC be approved to allow St. John's to be able to effectively communicate messages to the community without causing distraction, as is the purpose of signage. Proposed sign is in compliance with all other city sign regulations. By correctly using sign placement and dimming features, we can minimize the impact on the neighbors and the surrounding environment. Since the church is located in an institutional district, there are not many locations that the church can use off-site to advertise, which makes it imperative that the church be allowed a safe, unobtrusive, and effective method of communication with its members and with the community. Proposed sign would help the church meet its current objective of adding value to the surrounding community. Setting the sign back at 150 feet will deem the sign ineffective, and it will not be able to be seen from the road. It is perpendicular to the road, so it will not be facing the house that is across directly from it. The sign location was chosen out of necessity, as people need to be able to see the sign from Dongus Bay Road without turning their heads for long periods of time, which is extremely hazardous while you're driving. The message center, as I said, also has auto dimming capabilities via a photo cell, which can help the sign from being too bright when it's darker outside or too dim when the sun is out. It also has a specific scheduling software that allows the owners of the sign to automatically program the sign to run during certain times of the day and to shut itself off at designated times at night, as to not be intrusive to the neighboring properties. When correctly used, these features will minimize the intrusion on neighboring properties while allowing St. John's to communicate a variety of messages clearly to the public at the same time. Thank you all, and either myself, Zach, or we have a member of St. John's here with us can answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Nichols? Who determined the location of the sign?
Between speaking with Emily and the members of St. John, we determined that this would probably be the best location for the sign. We wanted to make sure that we kept the 10-foot setback from their lot line as to stay with code. So that was kind of the reasoning behind where it is now.
In your presentation, you said that because St. John's is in an, whatever that district is.
Institutional.
That they don't have many opportunities to communicate with the public or to advertise or communicate with their parishioners. Explain that to me.
And that's specifically off-site. That's not on their property. I think it's part of the code that allows them to have a certain amount of, I want to say, advertisements within other places. And since it's institutional, they only have so many, especially since they're planning on putting up a sign.
Oh, I see. I see.
This may be better answered by the church representative, but the neighbor across Dongus Bay Road from the church, have they been contacted and asked about their feelings on this?
Yes.
Do we have any information?
Well, here, why don't you please come up? It's important because we broadcast on the internet too, and so it's important that you're by the microphone, and it's important that you be sworn in. So do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address for our record, please.
My name is Mary Johnson. My address is North 108, West 16429, Scarlet Drive, Germantown.
Great. Okay, now you can go ahead with your questions.
I'm interested in any input that the neighbor living directly across the street from the church might have had regarding such a sign being put up.
Unfortunately, I don't have any input. I did not talk to him directly. And I apologize for that. I think I dropped the ball there, but we have. Thank you, Zach.
Well,
Third one up, right? Third one up.
here, you've got to swear,
Yep.
got to swear you in too. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you please state your name and address for our record?
Yeah. Zach Wenger, 4085 North 128th Street in Brookfield.
Excellent. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been working directly with a gentleman. His name's Eric Hillstrom. He's a member of the church, and he's been discussing this sign with the gentleman across the street. He was not able to share the name of that person with me. However, it was relayed to me through Eric Hillstrom, who once again is a representative of the church, that there's no issues. And the reason why he doesn't have any issues is, you notice on the map there, there's a lot of trees in front of his yard. In addition, with the sign not facing his property directly, the light itself will not be coming to his house, if that makes sense. So, and apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so I kind of sound terrible, so I apologize. But anyways, the trees being the main blocking there, that's why he said he didn't have any issues or any qualms with it, or qualms with it.
Excellent. Does that answer your question?
That it does, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I might also add that with the proximity of that neighbor to the subject property, they would have received a notice from the clerk's office giving information about the variance request and the hearing this evening.
Okay.
And I do want to draw attention to, like Zane did mention, the sign does have the capability to be automatically programmed to be turned off at a designated time at night and turned back on at a designated time in the morning. A lot of churches and schools will, just being a good partner in the community, will shut their sign off from about 9 p.m. or whenever the commission will decide. So from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., it's black as a courtesy to the community.
That makes sense. Ms. Zant, has the Plan Commission already approved this? I don't know what the process is. Do we have to decide first, then it goes to Plan Commission?
Sure, yeah, so the process would be if you grant the variance this evening, then it would go to the Plan Commission for approval, regular monument sign approval.
I see. Anybody have?
Yeah, you may have stated it earlier, but could you describe or re-describe the impact of putting the sign in within the boundaries, so 150 feet back? Like, how will that impact the value of the sign or value to the church?
So if you can notice as well, there are a couple trees on their property as well. And as it starts to get set further back, the neighboring properties also have trees. So if you're driving either way on Dongus Bay, you won't be able to see it until you're directly in front of the church, which while you're driving is looking like this. Super hazardous, super dangerous, and actually kind of defeats the purpose of signs as they're to be safe and effective means of communication.
There's a non-electronic sign there now, right?
Currently, yes, they have a reader board sign, which is beginning to outlive itself. So this was their new option.
Is it in the same location that this one's going to be?
No, it is not.
Where is it?
It is located, I don't know if you can see it on here, but thank you, Zach.
Yeah, it's right in this.
Okay, right, okay, yeah. So this is,
It's facing out towards Dongus Bay.
that rings a bell.
So parallel to the road.
Yep.
Yep.
And the reader board is to be removed. We will eventually look into possibly making it some kind of historical plaque, but that would be for another date.
Does anybody have any questions for any of our witnesses?
Well, I do have a question for Ms. Sand. If this was a non-electric sign, I assume they could have it right where they're proposing to have this sign and possibly just have spotlights on it from the ground, correct?
Correct, that would be correct, yes.
In the interest of our board being consistent, and Ms. Zant mentioned that there was a situation that the board looked at some time ago with a similar situation. In our collective memory, do we remember what the decision of the board was? And I know from experience that the sign is there in the previous case. How was that ultimately approved?
Is your question, how was it approved?
How was it approved? I seem to remember that the board did not approve the sign, but I could be wrong on that. But I know that the sign is there, so I'm just in the interest of our board being consistent in our decision-making, can we get some type of an explanation of how that sign became approved?
My recollection, and we can ask Ms. Zant, I have two thoughts. The first is my recollection was it had to do with the area of the sign, that it was too big for the structure it was in. That's thought number one, and Ms. Zant can speak to it. But the other thing that's important to remember is that each of these cases, rise and fall on their own facts, and I believe that there isn't sort of precedent, that we're not that our decisions are these. We're not making any interpretation of the zoning code. We're just finding particular facts. So a fact that we found in that case wouldn't really have any bearing on the fact that we might or might not find in this case, is at least my understanding. But with that said, I understand the reason for your question, and I'm interested to know if Ms. Zant recalls the answer.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the minutes from the August 11th, 2021 meeting. As you stated, there were actually 3 requests associated with this sign application, one of which was a setback from the residential district. And it was requested to reduce the setback to 117 feet from a residential district. There was a property owner that at an angle across the street that did attend the meeting, asking for the sign to be turned off at certain hours, but expressing their general support of the sign. There's discussion about it being difficult to determine how bright the sign would be at 117 feet versus 150 feet from the district. Let's see here. But there was also a discussion regarding it not being on a resident, shouldn't be the responsibility of a resident to go and work with a property owner on how bright the sign is. That's something that's already incorporated into the code to protect residents from those sorts of things.
What did we ultimately decide?
Ultimately decided to approve the variance with 2 in favor and 1 against.
On the setback, but I think we denied a variance related to the size.
I think that's probably right.
Yes, but yet somehow it's still there, so something,
Then Plan Commission must have approved something. Maybe they made it smaller or did something, but
or
somehow.
was the code changed?
The code wasn't changed. I think there was some lengthy discussion between the sign manufacturer and planning and zoning staff about what the actual square footage of the sign was, given there's a perimeter around the electronic board that isn't actually a part of the sign. So there was some lengthy discussion back and forth, and ultimately it was determined to meet the requirement.
Excellent, that's very helpful. All right, anybody have any other questions or witnesses?
And just to confirm, size is not part of the issue here at all. Right.
No.
Right, okay, just setback.
Anything else for any of our witnesses? Right. Mr. Nichols, as you heard before, that this will be the, oh, no, it's not. Sorry. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the proposed or the requested variance? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the requested variance? Is there anyone wishing to be heard, but neither in favor of nor opposed to the requested variance? All right. Asking to be heard, are they? Okay. All right. Now comes that point where I say that I'm about to close the hearing, and this will be your opportunity to tell us anything else that that you want to tell us before I do that.
So I really just wanted to reiterate that it does meet all other sign code for EMCs and for monument signs. It does meet the setback from within their property. It does meet the height requirements. It also meets the square footage requirements. And they are planning on using a masonry base, and they'll have some kind of landscaping feature around the base, which also helps add to the aesthetic value as well.
Thank you. Anybody, last questions? No?
Actually, I do have one last question. So there was a resident that was spoken to, and I believe you said that that person lived across the street. Is it possible, do you know which house? Because I see that there's one that looks like the driveway faces right across. Is that, what is that, that house? Okay, just want to confirm.
His concern, or lack thereof, is his coverage here
Okay.
of the trees. And it'd be perpendicular to the road.
Just have to confirm which house.
Yep, and then as you stated, it is 120 feet to his lot line, not to where his house sits now. So I just wanted to reiterate that as well. Thank you, by the way.
All right. Thanks. All right. Well, I will declare the hearing closed, and then we can begin our deliberations. Again, the first consideration for us is whether the variance will or will not be contrary to the public interest and will or will not be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, the variance would not be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code because, you know, the spirit of the zoning code is just to make sure people don't have electronic signs within 150 feet of their home, their lot lines, because it's unsightly. And, you know, I think it's hard to get around that.
Yeah,
And, you know, whether there are trees there now or the person who lives there got a notice and didn't come forward, it's not, the duty's not on them to have to come forward and complain. You know, we have these codes to protect people.
yeah, I agree with that.
I think some testimony also stated that even though the house is set back, you know, well beyond the 150 feet, I think there's some mention about, you know, whether you're checking whether you're in the house, in your yard or whatnot. So there's potential that, yeah, the 150 feet is 30 feet into that person's yard.
Right, and I think, you know, when the village board set the distance as 150 feet, they were well aware of the fact that typically your house is not right on the lot line.
It's true.
You know, so that was taken into account when they came up with the 150 feet.
Yeah. My thinking on it is that that the spirit of the zoning code is likely to prevent, you know, people from being subjected to sort of glaring bright light. And given that this sign is perpendicular to the adjacent to the area to the district that we're talking about, I think that that we can infer from that And given that the house is set back, I think we can infer that, that the neighbor across the street isn't going to be subjected to a whole bunch of bright light from the sign. So I would say that it is, that it is in accordance, or that it's not contrary to the public interest, and that it would be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code. But that's just my thought on it.
I think while the sign's perpendicular, I feel like it's even that house, the one that we had just talked about, it seems like they still would be able to see the sign, you know, unless they're perfectly in line with the edge of that sign, you know, light radiates in all directions.
Yeah.
Now they wouldn't have quite like the surface area, wouldn't be quite as large because they're looking at it from, you know, a significant angle. But I think the point that it's like perpendicular doesn't exclude. I think you'd still be able to see the sign.
Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough.
Right. I'm looking at a sign out the window right now that's perpendicular and quite far away, but
Yeah,
you know, I would not be pleased if I saw that out
There.
my, you know, window of my home.
fair enough. All right, number two, whether there are or are not exceptional, extraordinary, or unusual conditions or circumstances that apply specifically to this lot or parcel use, structure, or intended use that do not apply generally to other property or uses in the same district. I think given the proximity to, you know, that we're less than 100 feet from a residential district where you got your institutional district that is that close. I mean, by definition, a sign is going to have to be right out by, you'll want it out by the road. But the fact that this property is so close to a non-residential district is so close to a residential district, I think does make that unique. And I also think that I don't know what the restrictions on industrial district ability to advertise are, but that's one of the things that Mr. Nichols spoke to, and assuming that that is correct, the fact that that the church is in an institutional district and does sort of increase the need for a sign. Now, whether it needs to be an electronic sign is another issue. But I think that I could find that unusual conditions that apply specifically to this lot zoned institutional in the middle of residential districts that would justify the variance.
Do we know, are all churches zoned institutional? Is that normal? Or is this like something exceptional here, that they're not usually institutional?
Typical that they are.
Okay, okay. I'm thinking about, there are 3 other churches very close to this one, that I assume are also institutional, that are surrounded by residential. One of them was the neighbor of the previous case. The other one was the one we spoke about with the sign from back in August. And the other one is just up Fond du Lac Avenue from here. Those all feel like they have residential surrounding them as well, which leads me to believe that this does not feel extraordinary or exceptional in that case.
And I would agree with that. I think Crossway Church, which is the one next to the gentleman who was here earlier, you know, is right on Pilgrim, surrounded by residential. And I know they just have a non-electronic sign that has, I think it has spotlights on it. And I think sometimes they bring out like banners, you know, to advertise various things, but they definitely do not have an electronic sign.
The other 2 in my mind do have electronic signs, the one that we talked about, and then the one that the name forgets me, slips my mind, up on Lake Avenue. It's also a school. That one also has an electronic sign too. But it doesn't, to me, doesn't feel extraordinary in this case. Like
Right, being institutional
Yeah.
with residential around you is not extraordinary if you're a church.
I would make a bit of an argument that I think the circumstances are a bit exceptional or extraordinary. I like to drive past some of these properties before our meetings to get a better gauge for sizes and distances and things like that. And I can confirm what the representative of the church said, that a yard across the street does have bushes or trees that seem to be in a position that it would block some of the light from a sign, even though it's perpendicular to the road. Any light that might project across the street might be blocked by some of those trees. Now, that situation could change, obviously, but these also aren't what I, in my own terminology, would say, these are not city lots. The driveways in this area off of Donges Bay Road are a bit longer than the average city lot. So the house is set back into the parcel there, a bit more than a city lot would allow. So even though it doesn't conform completely to the 150 feet to the lot line, it certainly is more than 150 feet in my estimation to the house itself. So those two situations to me would provide some exceptional or extraordinary circumstances to this situation.
Let's move on to number 3, which is whether the variance is or is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same district. Any thoughts? I'll tell you what I think. I think that they're entitled to a sign. And so then the question becomes, is it a substantial property right that you get an electronic sign? 20 years ago, clearly not, because they were unusual. Now, are we getting to the point where you see so many electronic signs that it is sort of, you know, that if you want a sign, you're entitled to an electronic sign if that's the sign you want? I think we're getting close to that point. And that's my thought on whether it's a substantial property right. I think that's the question, whether you say, does the sign have to be electronic, or could you get by without? But I think they're entitled to a sign, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree they're entitled to a sign. I think if it becomes such that the village board decides everyone's entitled to an electronic sign, they will, change the code accordingly. I don't think it's, within our power to decide that now there's a new right that everyone is entitled to a electronic sign.
And we're also not arguing whether they can or cannot have an electronic sign. It's just about the placement of it. They
But-
could
Right,
30 feet.
right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Does that devalue the right that they possess already?
Right.
Anybody else? Nope. All right. Number 4, the variance will or will not create a substantial detriment to adjacent property, will or will not be contrary to public safety or public interest. My thoughts on that are that the testimony and the evidence that we have would suggest that it doesn't, that the variance would not create a substantial detriment to the neighbor across the street. And as far as public safety goes, I mean, I think I'm persuaded by this notion that if you set it back too far, people are going to, if anybody looks at it, they're going to be craning their neck. And what you want them to be able to do is see it from a distance so that they can, as they're driving down the road, they don't have to take their eyes off the road. So I think that it would not create a substantial detriment and it would not be contrary to public safety.
I guess, I mean, to me, it's sort of a question mark, whether it's creating a detriment or not, just because I don't like to rely upon trees blocking something, because trees, don't always last forever. And I also don't like to put the onus on, a resident to come forward and say they're not happy with something. I don't ever want to just interpret silence as they think it's fine, because we have the codes that we do to protect people so they don't have to be constantly monitoring what their neighbors are doing. So to me, it's kind of a question mark on that one.
Anyone else? All right, and last, a literal enforcement of the terms of the zoning code would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship to the applicant.
I think they could just have a non-electronic sign, as we've seen other churches, in the area do have. So I think it would be hard to say there'd be a hardship.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's a very similar question to the one about substantial property right, whether or not an electronic sign today, the absence of an electronic sign is a hardship. And I don't know. I mean, I think we're certainly getting closer to that point because you just see more and more of them. And so, but to me, that's the question here. If having you're exactly right. They could have a regular sign. So the question is having a non-electronic sign a hardship?
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen, other, very large churches, like Crossway that does not have an electronic sign, and I don't know if they think they're suffering a hardship, and, and I know we don't set precedents here, but, I don't want to start down a slippery slope of, just allowing electronic signs, based on the notion that it's a hardship if you don't have one. Because then I think it's up to the village board to change the code if that's what they believe.
Thinking about the creation of a hardship based on location of the sign. So if it's 30 feet set back further, does that now make it more challenging for them to communicate their messages effectively? Is that a hardship or is that less effective?
Well, that's an interesting way to think of it that I hadn't thought of. And whether that's practical difficulty, because now you're not communicating your message in as effective of a way.
Yeah, I agree that it would devalue it.
Yeah.
The community wouldn't give as much value because they're not able to see it or other reasons.
Anybody else have any thoughts? All right. Well, then, as before, because of the even number of us here today, I'm going to phrase the motion in the affirmative. So I will move to grant the variance as requested. Somebody's got to second it just so we can vote.
I'll second it.
All right. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Jeffrey Nope,
Yay?
Christine Huber,
Nay.
Tim Edwards,
Nay.
and Barry White.
Aye. All right, Mr. Nichols, the motion to grant the variance did not pass. And as a result, the request is denied. As you can see, we don't always agree on the facts and our interpretation of the zoning code. So as before, you'll get notice in the mail of our decision here tonight, and you will have the opportunity to file an appeal. The paperwork will tell you how that process works. Thank you for your presentation.
You all.
All right, do we have anything on the calendar for a future hearing?
No, we do not.
All right, With that said, we have reached the end of our agenda, and I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
I'm not sure it needs a second, but in case it does, I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, and we are adjourned.